folks, my name is Tom Graham. I'm a live sound engineer based in Nashville. I'm out here in LA doing some rehearsals for a new group that's going on the road soon. I've been lucky enough to have some time now on a new product that not a whole lot of information is out about it yet, at least not from users so far. It's new enough, so I just wanted to get my thoughts out there, see if it helps anybody out there maybe make some decisions, or any users that maybe I can help you avoid the pitfalls that I fell into setting it up and getting it up and running. And that new product is from Waves, the XWSG card for X32 and M32 consoles. And what it does is it enables an X and M32 consoles to take a hold of Waves DSP power for processing all Waves plugins, which is pretty great considering that there's not a whole lot of plugin options available for the X32 consoles as it is. So opening it up to Waves plugins, which I'm a huge fan of, is a huge step. Just before we go any further, I just want to make clear that I am not paid to say any of these things. These are brands that are out there. This is information that's out there, and everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but these are the things that I have found running sound, using it, not using it, and this is what I've come up with. Alright, so to make the setup complete, you need all the right pieces. I'm going to speak briefly about each individual piece. One, you'll need an X32 or an M32 console. Now, keep in mind, you can do any of all of the ranges of these. That means the full-size X32, the full-size M32, or the compact 16+1 fader versions of either of those, or at least in the Midas version, the core version, which has no physical faders. It is just the brain, effectively, which is interesting, and I'll get to later why. Alright, so the next thing you're going to need is the XWSG card from Waves. You can buy it directly from Waves, or right now Sweetwater's got it street price of $500, which is pretty cool when you figure out what all it can do. After that, you're going to need Cat 6 or Cat 5e cables. Big note, this will end your session if you don't do this right. Cat 5 cables will not cut it, as I learned. I'm in a rehearsal space, we didn't have the right cable, so hey, can we borrow one? Turned out it was Cat 5, and it all came crashing down. Once I switched the cable to a Cat 6, smooth sailing. So it has to do, someone more technically knowledgeable than me can tell me why, but I believe Cat 6 cables and Cat 5e cables have something to do with the shielding and the overall speed and bandwidth. Could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But Cat 5 cables will not cut it. You need Cat 5e, or as Wave recommends, Cat 6 cables. Alright, so the next piece of gear we're going to need for this particular setup is a Waves SoundGrid server. You can run this natively on the CPU processor of your computer, but that is going to introduce quite a bit of latency, which is the reason we got this card in the first place, is to have low latency plugin processing. So we're going to look at a server from Waves, and they come in 3 sizes varieties. There's the Impact, which is the smallest. There's the Server 1, which is the one that I'm using right now, and there's the Extreme server, which is, as you can guess, pretty extreme. As a note, I am using the Server 1, the middle guy. I have plugins instantiated on all 32 channels of what's coming to me, at least 2 on every single channel, and sometimes as many as 6. Like, I just basically tried to break the thing. I'm at about 20% system usage. So in reality, I could have easily have gotten away with the Impact server. There's no reason I'd ever need to get more than that. We decided to go with the Server 1 for future-proofing if we decided to move to a larger console and we had more channels and more places to put plug-in processing and so on and so forth, that maybe it's a little bit future-proof for down the road. And all right, the last few things you're going to need is a gigabit switch, and there is a list on the Waves website of which ones they approve for usage. This pretty standard stuff. It's just an Ethernet switch. And then finally, the multi-rack SoundGrid host application. Most of the time, if you're going to buy a server from Waves, it's going to sell it in a combo with the software by itself. It's something in the neighborhood of $200 to $400. But really all it is a software controller for the server. And I think that's an important bit about this. You do need a laptop for this situation, or some kind of computer. The computer is only a controller for the server. The server is actually what's taking control of crunching all the numbers, doing all of the plug-in processing to then send back to the console. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about signal flow, because it's audio and you gotta know it, and for this setup it can get a little tricky. Alright, so here's my audio setup with no waves at all, just so you kind of know what I'm working with. I'm going from the stage inputs into a Midas DL32, Ethernet to a M32C core that I'm using for monitors, and then out of the M32C into my M32 at front of house. Now I'll talk about later, maybe in another video, of why I'm not parallel outing from the DL32 to both of the consoles. I'm going effectively in series from one to another. It has to do with how I'm routing my talkback. Again, I'll do that in another video, because that really threw me for a curve too. And this is what it looks like once we have our XWSG card installed. With more or less with the red lines indicating audio over Cat5 AES50, and yellow lines is data over Cat6 cables. Now, I'm going to simplify this. Think of your signal flow working more like this. From the stage box to your monitor console, and then your monitor console straight to the Waves card to get processed. It doesn't really hit the console until everything returns back from Waves. Now, it's important to note that there are a couple ways you can set this thing up. This is, to me, the most obvious choice of processing all 32 channels independently. There are a couple ways that I will go over later in the video and that you can find resources for elsewhere on the internet. So in this particular setup, not only are we able to process all 32 channels, but we're able to record and then play back for virtual sound check all 32 channels. In all the other setups that you might find out there, like running plugins as an effects insert or an insert on a bus of some kind, those are pretty much moot. Those are taken out. So this was multi-track, and virtual sound check was a really important part of this decision to go with this. So that's yet another reason of why we went for 32 in, 32 out. And that might be my biggest bugaboo about this whole system. I'm not able to use any Waves plugins on my master bus. On any of my extra buses, I'm not able to do like a parallel drum compression or anything like that. I'm not able to use Waves reverbs or delays. I can't do any of that. It's really just input channels in line, and that is all. If someone's figured out another way to get 32 in, 32 out, multi-track recording of all 32 channels, and virtual playback, and still using one as an effects return, let me know. But the XWSG card is only a 32 in, 32 out card, and that is the limitation that it was built upon. Alright, a quick word of praise for Waves of figuring out how to do this, though, is right now I'm sitting next to my laptop, and yet in the next room is the console and the server, and they're chugging away just fine. As in, if my laptop happens to crash or get unplugged from the server for whatever reason, nothing happens. No interruption of audio. All of my processing remains the same. I can't change anything because, like I said, the laptop is my controller for the server, but everything keeps on chugging. And for even more what-if scenarios, if, let's say, for whatever reason the server goes down, or your switch goes bad, or something else goes wrong, and the console is no longer communicating with the server, in which case you would lose audio, I highly recommend creating a scene that's the last scene you had saved with Waves installed, but you label it Panic, is what I called mine, and have all of your inputs be directly from your AES card rather than Waves. And that switchover from your inputs being from AES 50 rather than from the card is almost instantaneous. There is a hardly noticeable blip of audio between switching when going from one scene to a next of going from card to AES 50. And that I have that set up as a hotkey on the right hand side where I just hit panic and it immediately switches so that I'm completely bypassing all of my waves, everything, and I have audio passing straight AES 50 just like I would without waves. Alright, so one of the main reasons I wanted to do this video in the first place is that I had a terrible time figuring out not only how to get my laptop to be the controller for multi-rack SoundGrid, which is the application that controls your processing within the server to operate it live, but then how to multi-track record, and then eventually to play back for virtual soundcheck. So here's what I found out. So here's multi-rack SoundGrid. It's very flexible, it's really powerful, it's where you put in all your plugins, it's where you decide how you want to process, so on and so forth. I encourage you to just dig into the settings, look at the latency settings, look at how you can rearrange certain plugins, and the options are almost limitless. And here's the next window I want to talk about. It's called the SoundGrid Connections window. Open up multi-rack SoundGrid and hit F3 and you'll see what I'm talking about. You will notice that a lot of these lines are in red. I took the screenshot while I was not actually connected to the server, which means that there was something faulty with the connection. As soon as I plug in my laptop again to my network switch, they'll all go back to black and everything will be fine. The first two lines are very well documented, and that is the signal flow of going back and forth between your card installed in your console, the X-WSG, and multi-rack. So the first line is going from the card to multi-rack to be processed, all 32 channels. That means that all your signals coming into the card are going to go to multi-rack, you can process them, and then the next line is that path backwards from multi-rack after it's been processed in multi-rack back to the card. And then we come to the third and fourth lines you see here, which took me a phone call to Waves to figure out how to do. The third line is the X-WSG card to SG driver, which is your SoundGrid driver. This is the pathway that allows you to go from the card on the console directly to a driver in your laptop or computer to multi-track record. So you can pull up Waves Tracks Live, which I highly recommend. It's very stable and free, to capture your multi-tracks straight off of the console, pre-processing, and multi-track record. And then comes the last line of SD driver back to multi-rack. This is very interesting and gets a little bit tricky, but this is how we get things back for virtual soundcheck. In this case, for virtual soundcheck, what you'll want to do is check this last line of driver to multi-rack and uncheck the first line of XWSG to multi-rack. What that's going to do is that the source, effectively, of multi-rack is going to be whatever's coming off the driver, in this case the playback from whatever you've recorded previously, and not the XWSG card coming off of your console. Alright, a note that came up on my phone call with Waves was that they seriously recommend against running multi-rack SoundGrid and recording onto the same computer. They say that you should definitely have a separate computer for each. It's possible, but not recommended. And so you'd have another computer that would just go into the switch and you would have these one or the other connections on the other computer, one for recording and playback, one for multi-rack SoundGrid. However, so far, no problems yet. All right, those are the technical things that I wanted to get out there, and things that I've fell over and stumbled over, and maybe they can help you if you decide to go out and get yourself an XWSG card and set it up for all the things that I was trying to do. The rest of this video is opinion only. This is my opinion of my experiences, and yours are just as valid as mine. That's totally cool. So, is it worth it? I'm not entirely sure. It does seem kind of inflexible of what this system can do. Like I said earlier, you can either have all of your channels processed, or I think it's like 6 effects buses, or a few of these things, and then you can't multi-track record. So it's very much an or. It's not, you kind of have to pick and choose. So here's the thing. This system is supposed to work with an X32, which is pretty much the cheapest digital console on the market. Street price, you can get a full-size X32 for what, like $2,000 right now, which is an unbelievable value for money. I own one, and it's just because, worst case scenario, I have an X32. I'm set. I know what I'm walking into. I can handle a lot of situations on it. It's great. But when you're talking about another $1,500, and that, by the way, is the Impact Server combo available on Waves, which is everything you need to get started, including the card, the software, and an Impact Server, which, as I stated earlier, is plenty. That's almost buying the console over again. Choose your battles, folks. If you're at a point where you're wanting that next level of sound and you want that next level of fidelity and flexibility, it might be worth it to look into renting something. I have to be honest. It's very cool and it's very fun, but you might want to weigh your options. Now, one scenario that I was very close to getting myself into that I'd love to see if someone else has done this, is let's say that 32 channels is plenty for whatever situation that you're in, and your monitor rig is just fine with an X32, and you've kind of already bought into it, so you have a stage rack, maybe you have a core, maybe you have a console. Here's an interesting idea. Waves has come out with the LV1 mixer, which is a completely software mixer. The software runs on a computer, which you can control with either touchscreen monitors, or they have actually come out with a physical control fader module. And the GUI is the only thing that's being run by what they recommend is a Mac Mini running Windows for multi-touch. And then, just like in this situation, all the number crunching, all the actual mixing and DSP processing is done on a Waves server. How this relates back into it is that if you get, let's say, the M32 core, just the rack mount with no digital or no physical faders, you can slip the card, the XWSG card, into that, and that acts as your I/O for this situation. So you plug up your M32 core into your stage box just like you normally would, and then the Waves card into the switch, and then that into your LV1 mixer. What that'll allow me to do is that I have all of the freedom and almost unlimited processing ability of the new LV1 mixer, which I highly recommend you go watch some videos on those. So I can do all my bus processing. I can do my parallel processing. And then maybe I can take hold of all the processing power that my server 1 has. So that's a very interesting way to go about it. Check it out. I'd be really interested if anyone else has done this. And if no one else has, I want to be the first. Alright, that about does it for this video. I just really wanted to go over some kind of setup things that I ran into, some other ideas, and my first impressions of the XWSG card, along with the server and multi-rack SoundGrid. Like I said, we've really only gotten into rehearsals. I haven't taken this on the road yet, but I will soon. Expect more updates, and maybe I'll get into some other things that I've found about the X32 system, including my kind of funky front of house talkback rig, which took me a while, but it's out there, and I can just clarify it for someone else. If you have any other questions about the Waves, or how it relates to the M32, or any other cool sound stuff, I'm game. Thanks for watching. Bye.